Well, David, what rot, I have to say. And you've fallen into the trap that I will explain, and I hope that Wayne falls into that very same trap. But before I explain what that trap is, I too have three villainies. The first isn't why me. I thought I'd better explain this because, for God's sake, Corbusier will be turning in his watery grave to think that a chartered surveyor is talking about him as a hero. And I'd better just explain away the fact that I'm a chartered surveyor. The chartered surveyor it's very badly portrayed here in The Evolution of Man. He's the second in from the left, wearing what you can't see on that slide, which is a Barber jacket. So really, I am the least qualified person to be entering this debate or claiming that Corbusier is a hero, though I think he is. And the reason I think he is, and this is one of the reasons I think he is, this is a slide that I've nicked off Christophe. You might have seen these before in Christophe's presentation. This is Unité, and is probably the reason, or the next three slides are probably reasons why I'm here. Timber Wharf, a building that we completed about 5 years ago, was described as what Unité might have looked like had Corbusier supported Man United. And Park Hill in Sheffield, described by my friend and critic, writer and general man about town, Phil Griffin, who's in the audience tonight, as a building that hangs like a cloud of bad breath over Sheffield. He did suggest that all we needed to do was clean its teeth. And contrary to David's proposition, I put it to you that Corbusier was a human being. God knows that is an attribute that so few architects possess. This is him in his cabin. Christophe said, don't attempt to pronounce it in French. Sat in his monastical environment, thinking about the new world as it presented itself. And he did very human things there. This is a little cabin that's kind of timber-clad. I'm sure you all saw pictures of it in the exhibition catalogue, with picture windows that framed views, with mirrors that reflected, allowed him to shave, and allowed him to look at the view over the lake. And when he went walking, he collected bits and pieces, natural bits and pieces, stones, bones, all things that he then began to articulate into a piece of architecture. He was, above all, a human being and thought as a human being does, and sought to try and rationalise and deliver to us a better way of living our lives. And not conditioning the aesthetic, because here's the shots of Unité in the early days, showing that families could actually begin to express themselves within the architecture within which he framed it. I want to just for one moment compare Unité with Park Hill, because this is the trap that I was talking about earlier, that actually Unité is one of the most human pieces of architecture. The way the building touches the ground on those pilotti, the way that they are formed around entrance to celebrate, to express the joy of entry, the fact that they are like trees, they're gentle to touch, they're formed in a way that suggests a human being should hang around those spaces. That is not a urine-smelling area of gathering crisp packets. It's actually an area of great beauty and a rival to a fantastic building. Compare and contrast that with Park Hill in Sheffield. Now, this is where Corbusier got his bad name, the translation from his view of humanity, his view of humanity in architecture, through to the municipal execution of the essence of modernity in buildings, in mass-produced buildings. And, of course, this was driven by speed, this was driven by corruption, this was driven by all factors that shouldn't really have been driving the philosophy behind the architecture. And the problem here is not the architect, it's the process. Plus ça change. We're still in the same situation in the UK, where it's process that is delivering bad buildings, it's process that is delivering the wrong kind of responses. Corbusier was simply, or the interpretation of the ideals of Corbusier was simply a victim of process. Compare the beauty of the top of Unité and the frivolity the forms and the way in which those are expressed, and contrast that to the top of Park Hill in Sheffield, which does it in a very sombre, very dire, and very in a way that fails to uplift the human spirit in the way in which Corbusier's architecture was so capable of doing. The streets in the sky, the thinking of the entity of a city in one building executed with the double height spaces compared to the way in which it was delivered in Park Hill. The essence of the ambition remained, but the execution fell so far short. And it is the execution and the process that needs to be blamed, not the architect or the architecture. The second proposition as to why Corbusier should be a hero is originality. Punk rock was a defining moment in musical history. It broke down the doors, it burst open the barriers, it allowed things to happen. After punk, nothing was ever the same. And I'm not likening the work of Corbusier to punk, but the aftermath of punk, what came out of punk, what punk facilitated. It actually tore down the boundaries, and it allowed all kinds of things to happen. And Peter Saville, who's on the left there, next to Tony Wilson, actually said at Tony Wilson's funeral, he thanked Tony as he sat there in his coffin for giving him a piece, or giving him a position in the last original journey in rock and roll, because that's what the whole kind of factory ethos represented. It was the last single original journey in rock and roll. And in actual fact, so too was the work of Corbusier and the work of the modernists generally. They were emerging into the machine age. It was invigorating. Planes, cruise liners, all these kind of crazy things that were coming out of mass production. How could that fail to inspire the work of building buildings, that very prosaic, that very traditional, and very historic craft? And he seized that opportunity to turn the whole thinking about the way in which buildings are put together in a way that was incredibly invigorating and original. And finally, this word modern and modernism. Peter Saville also gifted Manchester recently, or suggested Manchester should make the proclamation of being original and modern. And those are two very loaded words. And the notion of modern and the word modernity is a really important one. It's a constantly challenging one. It's a constantly questioning one. Is what we are doing modern? And what's really interesting is the capacity of Corbusier and the strength of Corbusier to wrestle that most dynamic of words, modern, into a stand that actually we can no longer use the word modern in the context of architecture without referring it back to the modern movement, modernism, and he locked it in. He contained the word modernity and modernism, and now in everything that we do epitomizes the very word modern. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't already think Corbusier was a hero, you should change your mind and pick up that green card after the debate. Thank you.